When it mattered most. So when you're around the same as the other best players, when it doesn't matter. And when it matters most, you are standing head and shoulders above the pack. What does that make you? The best player on earth.
People said LeBron was the best. I thought KD was the best. Now people are saying the third best player in the NBA has been Kawhi Leonard. And now you can make the argument he's the second best or the best player in the NBA.
When it comes to shooters, snipers, defenses don't matter. Their attitude is, as long as you don't block my shot and I get it off, it's a wrap.
I think KD's played his last game as a Warrior.
I mean, that's cool and all, but, like, when you go to 5 straight finals, I respect those guys, but when you go to 5 straight, I mean, it takes more than just a couple of NBA guys. It's like an all-time team, but whatever. That's not. I'd rather win a championship than be 13 All-NBA, so it's all good.
All right, y'all, what's good? Before we get into this preview, I want to talk a little bit about what I'm doing and where my work is. It's no secret for those of you that have been on there, it's on my Patreon. True to my Bay roots, I'm independent, man. I'm popping the trunk and making this happen myself. I don't have any sponsorship. I don't really get any ad revenue from YouTube. I'm a 35-year-old man with a family, striving for my dreams. And so if you really like my stuff and you want to see me continue to strive and build up, then support me on Patreon. That's where my finals coverage will be, breaking down each game. Moving into the summer, I'll be live for free agency June 30th. I'll cover the draft. I'm going to cover Summer League, which I'm going to try to get to. I have a ton of exclusive content planned all the way into next season. But if you just want to check out the finals breakdowns, check it out, man. Support someone who is trying to make it happen on their own independently. Anyway, let's get on to this preview. Let's jump right into the point guard matchup in Kyle Lowry and Steph Curry. Two guys that are very familiar with each other and have been in the league relatively the same amount of time. Kyle Lowry has kind of exercised his playoff demons here in this last series with Milwaukee. You see him playing with a lot more aggression and confidence, particularly in his three-point shot. And that bodes very well for Toronto. They're going to need his offense, let's be clear. But where he really shines is he's an effort guy, right? Kyle Lowry, he doesn't have a lot of physical attributes. He doesn't have a lot of length or quickness. So he's going to out-hustle you. He's going to get into your comfort zone and play positional basketball. So the 50-50 balls, drawing charges, the little extra plays, right? The Draymond Green type plays, if you will. That's what Kyle Lowry brings to the table for the Raptors. And you can expect him to get quite a few of those throughout this series. Now, I think it's imperative that Steph, realizing how he plays, who he is as a player, kind of uses his strength against him. Early on, establishing the landing zone on his shot. Shoot with him in your space and kind of see what the referees will allow and will not allow, and perhaps back him off from being too physical early on. Now, can Lowry match Steph Curry's offensive output and go blow for blow with him? Maybe for a quarter or a half, but that's not what Toronto's going to ask him to do. They just need him to remain aggressive and make Steph work on the other end. Don't let anything come easy for Steph. That means attacking him downhill, being physical, and shooting his shot, whether that be the three ball or getting in the paint. One thing to make note of is Kyle Lowry is one of the best charge drawers in the league, and we know Steph's susceptible to getting in foul trouble. That's something to look out for in this. But I think ultimately, when you look at Toronto's strategy defensively, they tend not to switch. But if they don't switch the high pick and roll with Lowry and whatever big the Warriors choose to exploit, most likely Gasol, you're going to see them get boiled like a frog. It may not happen right away, and it may not happen in game one, but eventually they'll look up and realize they're being cooked by the chef. And that in turn is going to force Gasol off the floor, and this is going to turn into a small ball game. Just like you saw in the previous matchup with Portland, Terry Stotts was kind of forced to only use Cantor when Steph Curry was off the floor. And I think you're going to see the same situation where Nurse is going to only be able to use Gasol when Curry's off the floor with the second unit. And that is where Kerr will probably find minutes for the returning DeMarcus Cousins. Now, don't get me wrong. This is not going to all play out in game one. This is what we're going to see as the series progresses and adjustments are made. Forecasting that they eventually go small, let's take a deeper look at Serge and Siakam, who are really going to be the keys to them doing so. And I'll be honest with you, Warrior fans, it's not an ideal matchup because if you look at these two guys, they're longer and they're more athletic than both Draymond and Looney when it comes to playing in the paint. Their size and athleticism has proven to be a problem in the past. The Bucks, with a much different look and a much bigger front court, did a very good job of neutralizing Siakam. His patented spin move where he gets back right, they pretty much took away by gapping him and never letting him feel contact to let him spin back off of. Now that's a strategy that you could easily see Looney being comfortable using, but the difference is Kevon Looney's 6'9". Milwaukee constantly had a 7-footer on him, whether it was Mirotic, Lopez, or Giannis, and Siakam is used to having the length advantage, and that's something he didn't have against Milwaukee, but he will regain in this series. And so what that changes is I don't think the Warriors defenders, Looney, Draymond, Jordan Bell, whoever it may be, is not going to be able to give him as much space and gap him because he's going to be comfortable just going right over the top. He won't need the spin move. And so therefore the Warriors defenders will probably have to crowd him more and it will open things back up for his signature spin move. Warriors bigs are going to have to win the position battle. That's just what it's going to boil down to because they're not going to out jump. They're not going to out athletic these two bigs. So they have to be in the right position at the right time. Now, here's the key difference between Serge and Siakam. Siakam ultimately wants to get to the rim and finish at the rim. Serge loves the mid-range jumper. Serge has become much more of a jump shooter. As a defender, you have to realize what each guy wants most. So with Serge, you have to close out pretty hard. You're going to have to stay in his face with the hand up, understanding, yeah, he's going to pull that mid-range jumper every time he has it. Siakam is a little different. I think Siakam, you need to close out much more conservatively. If you go flying out to the weak side corner as he catches the ball, he's going to go right around you with a plethora of finishes driving on that baseline. So close out with your hand up, but stay down and dare him to shoot that three that he's shooting at a 29% clip. Couple of things I expect to see as the series goes on is one, I think Steph will choose to pick on Siakam in the switches. I think you're going to see him out in space, being challenged and dared to stay disciplined against the chef. I also expect to see Jordan Bell get some minutes against these two athletes. Sometimes you got to just match athletes with athletes. Bell and Damian Jones are two best athletes. I don't think you can trust Damian in the finals, but Bell has proven he can give us spot minutes against these guys. All right, let's address the biggest problem for Toronto in this series, the Danny Green problem. Danny Green has fallen off a cliff. He was virtually unplayable in the conference finals against the Bucks. He just couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with those spot-up corner threes. And he had a quick leash and expect him to have an even quicker leash in this series. The problem is Danny Green is their longest, best versatile wing defender. And alongside Kawhi, he's the only guy that has finals experience. So with that being said, I expect Nurse to start with Green in hopes of him getting out of this slump, but you're going to see just as quick a leash to perhaps Powell or the red-hot Fred VanVleet. And at this point in their careers, both those guys are better offensive options, right? They can do a little bit more with the ball in their hands, and they're both three-point shooters. The problem is defensively. Now you're asking one of those guys to most likely guard Klay Thompson for extended periods of time. And if you haven't been paying attention, Klay Thompson has grown very adept at big boying little guards in the paint. Just ask CJ McCollum or Dame Lillard. No doubt Nurse will try to hide them off one of the Warriors scorers. I'll talk about that here in a couple minutes. But let's first address the claw, Kawhi Leonard. Look, man, I've been as impressed as everybody else. We knew how talented he was, but what he's doing right now at clearly not 100% healthy has just elevated him into really elite air as far as the NBA hierarchy goes. The competitiveness, the clutch gene, and frankly, the leadership, all on display on the biggest stage. But let's be real here. Things are going to get a lot harder for Kawhi in these finals. If you watch that Milwaukee series, we've been talking about it all year long, the drop coverage. We've seen Denver use it. We saw Portland forced out of it in the Western Conference Finals. Milwaukee tried to switch at times, but ultimately, their bigs were too accustomed to their drop coverage that they had been playing all season long, and Kawhi took advantage. Kawhi got his mid-range jumper off far too easy throughout that Eastern Conference Finals. And with the Warriors switching defense, that's just not going to be the case. Kawhi is going to have to work a lot harder to get to his spots and get his shots. And for someone who seemed to be rationing out the juice in his legs, for a lack of a better term, that doesn't seem like an ideal situation. If you watched Kawhi closely, he wasn't comfortable jumping off of one foot, left or right, which means he ultimately wasn't comfortable striding all the way to the rim. But Milwaukee seemed to not figure this out and was playing right into his hands, allowing him to come off screens to pull up for jump shots. And I think a lot of his offense was kind of based off what a healthy Kawhi could do and the threat of that. When if you were paying attention, Kawhi wasn't able to get all the way to the rim, nor was he looking to. I think the Warriors, with so much time to prepare, will see this and challenge Kawhi differently, particularly daring him to stride all the way to the rim. Crowd him, don't give him room for his jump shot, and say, I dare you, get all the way to the rim and finish off one leg. And I'm sure we'll see Kawhi do it several times, but the question is, can Kawhi do it through an entire series? That leads me to some of the strategies you're going to see team-wide from both of these teams. One, from Golden State, I think you're going to see them look to push the ball and run, get out and run as much as possible, because when Toronto sets their defense in the half court, they're as good as it gets with their length and ability to recover. That could go one of two ways. Obviously, they could get some easy baskets and they could turn the ball over very easily. So that's something to monitor. Fast break points versus turnovers. From Toronto's side, I think that they're going to try to run the offense through Gasol when he's in the game, or Siakam, and try to bait Golden State into doubling them in the post, generating easier shots for both Kawhi and Kyle Lowry. Kerr and the Warriors have shown a tendency to be too quick to double the post. Before the player even establishes that he can score, the Warriors will send a double, and I think Nurse is going to look to exploit that with both Gasol and Siakam. It would be a mistake. First, see if they can get buckets in the post before you compromise the defense by doubling. This brings me to my trendy X factor section of this breakdown. Everybody's got to have an X factor. What exactly is an X factor? I think some people confuse that, because what it is by definition, the variable in a given situation that could have the most significant impact on the outcome. So not necessarily like, oh, you could say, oh, Steph Curry and Kawhi Leonard, they're the X factors. No, we kind of know what we're going to get from the superstars. It's the other guys that are the variables. And speaking of variables, Kevin Durant, right? From everything that's being reported, it doesn't look like we're going to see Kevin Durant. So I'm not going to speak on what he brings to the matchup. Maybe he will have a Willis Reed moment late in this series, but I'm assuming not. Instead of just having one X factor for each team, I really went over this matchup for several days. I looked at all the angles and I changed my mind on some things, and I really took a deep dive before I came to y'all with this take, and I hope it shows. My first thought was, it's going to be Serge Ibaka. Like, if Serge can play like a borderline all-star, if he can play like he played in game 3 and 4 of the conference finals, I think he can have a huge impact. But then I also realized, like, Serge can kind of be punked. And maybe that's not the right word, but what I mean by punked is Serge's confidence can be easily rattled. And so I think he can be taken out of a series and deemed not as effective as you think he might be. So then that moves me to Danny Green. And I think it's both Danny Green and Serge, because their length defensively and their athleticism and their experience is going to be needed in this series. But if they don't show up on the offensive end and shoot the shots that they need to shoot with confidence, it's going to have a big impact on how this series plays out. Moving over to the Warriors, I think it's Kevon Looney. We've seen him grow by leaps and bounds, his meteoric rise to NBA middle ground. No, I don't want to take a shot at Loon, but man, he's become, like Steve said, he's become a foundational piece to what the Warriors do. And he's been so good throughout these playoffs. But like I had brought up previously, Serge and Siakam present a difficult matchup for Looney, just physically speaking. They're longer, they're faster, they're more athletic. And so if Looney can match, well, I won't say match, because he's not going to be able to match their athleticism in the paint, but can he be more physical, and can he use his positioning, his timing, and his basketball IQ to outplay them or match them in the paint? The other part of this equation is, let's assume Looney does struggle to match their athleticism and speed up and down the court. Who does Kerr go to? It appears that he's far more willing to dive into his bench than Nurse is his. Jordan Bell, I had previously brought up, he would be the athlete to match them. Jerebko, physical and spreads the floor. Or does Kerr go super small and ask Iguodala to essentially play the 4? Going into this matchup, Toronto has the more established bench rotation at this point. It's Ibaka, Van Vliet, and Powell have all been performing for them off the bench. The problem is, if one of them goes down with an injury or stops performing on this stage, do they have anybody else to go to? I don't think they have anybody else that Nurse trusts. The Warriors, in much more of a mix and match situation with Bell, Cook, Jerebko, McKinney. These guys maybe aren't as established or reliable, but Kerr has done very well mixing and matching in the moment. But ultimately, you ask, who's going to finish the game for both sides? This is how I see them matching up late in games. You're going to have Steph and Van Vliet, Clay and Kawhi, Iguodala and Lowry, Draymond and Siakam, and Looney and Serge. Now, obviously, foul trouble and hot hands or cold hands can alter that, but I think on paper, those are the 10 that are going to be on the floor when the game is decided. Here's the end game. Kawhi Leonard's been amazing. And I had previously mentioned, he's not 100%. Nick Nurse has found very few spots to rest him throughout these playoffs, a high minute load, and it makes what he's done even more impressive. But if you're the Warriors, here's what I do. I take away his gravity. I take an angry and agitated Klay Thompson, and I stick him on Kawhi Leonard on an island. No help defense, and I say, all right, Kawhi, go by Klay over and over again, one-on-one. Oh, Klay gets in foul trouble? Put Iguodala on him. Iguodala's banged up? You put Draymond on him. My point is, I think the Warriors need to make Kawhi prove that he has enough juice in the tank to score one-on-one in isolation situations over and over again. Because if I had to bet for a series, I don't think he can do it. And that's why I have the Warriors in 6.
I've been winning so long, it's like alchemy. I've been winning so long, it's like alchemy.